Now, big news now if you're buying or selling a home in or around Indianapolis.
Yeah, great news if you're a seller. Maybe a little tougher news if you're a buyer. 24 Hour News 8's Brittany Lewis talked with a realtor about this new report. What was in it?
Well, Lauren, good morning. Many homes that are selling in just a few days, sometimes even just hours, are right here in the Irvington neighborhood on the east side of Indianapolis. I talked to one woman who lives in this neighborhood, and she says a house on her block sold in just 18 minutes, and that's the case in other places in central Indiana as well. The report from RE/MAX says buyers in the Indianapolis area are looking for walkable communities and are wanting to get in areas like Carmel's Arts and Design District, downtown Zionsville, and Fountain Square, and then, of course, here in Irvington. The report says that Boone, Hendricks, and Shelby counties are seeing some of the highest sales growth. Across the state, the report found that there are more people competing for fewer homes than this time last year, making for a very competitive market. This is the advice Helen Metkin, who owns a RE/MAX office in Carmel and is on the Indiana Association of Realtors, gives to her clients.
If you know in your heart of hearts that this is the house for you, you have to go in strong and you have to go in right away because it'll be gone tomorrow.
And to get the house, Helen says you need to be financially prepared. She says she tells her clients that they can't even be actively looking at homes unless they have pre-approval from a mortgage lender. And of course, she says that their credit needs to be in good standing because otherwise these houses will be gone. Scott and Lauren.
Yeah, again, it's great news if you're a seller, but if you're a buyer, it can get kind of frustrating out there. All right, Brittany, thank you.
It is so awesome that all of you showed up today. I really hope that we can provide you guys with some information that's going to be helpful for you and your business. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start framing the conversation today. We are talking about tech, but tech talk stands for technology, education, community, and housing. We all know that real estate is not dependent solely on one thing. It involves so many things, everything from schools to public safety and things like that. But what you need to know is you need to know what are the future trends. You need to start understanding kind of what does the future look like. How will technology be impacted by that? We're starting to have apps and services for everything. So how can you and your business start thinking proactively forward? So in order for us to start framing the conversation, we actually need to take a little bit of a dive into society. Sorry if this is slightly controversial, but I think you'll all get a kind of a kick out of it. So, Millennials, Gens, and Gen Z, they're basically ruining the world, right? They're ruining everything. I think about a decade ago, one of the biggest fears was, oh my gosh, this generation's not going to buy houses. And what we're finding now is they actually are. They're buying houses. And NAR has released a lot of data showing that within the next 10 to 15 years, they're going to be your primary buyer. So we need to understand what makes this generation tick. And why is it so important for us to have this conversation? What's really interesting, if any of you study sociology or study just society and what's happening trending-wise, we have two huge generations, the largest in the history of humanity. We have boomers and we have millennials. So, millennials though, who are these insane, crazy people with their weird hipster hats, their desires to be in these independent coffee shops and just, I don't know, they're kind of bizarre people. They love to test absolutely everything. Some of the things they say makes zero sense. They'll protest anything and everything. They're making kind of blasphemous statements about things like education. And in this picture right here, their desires, the way that they're changing retail. I mean, you can't tell if it's a coffee shop or if that's a greenhouse. I'm not even sure what some of this is. I was assuming it's a coffee shop, but the first time I looked at it, I was like, what the heck is this? But they're also challenging society's moral ethics. There are pushes for smoking, I mean cigarettes and other things, but they're really challenging some of the traditions and the morals and the fabric of our society. But I mean, are they? Are they really? Does anybody recognize this generation? Who are these people? I wasn't going to say it. So it's kind of fascinating that you had this generation that pushed against the envelope, that questioned the executive, the president, of the United States that went into the workplace and said, we don't want to dress the way that you tell us to dress. We want to dress like we want to dress, right? It's fascinating that these are the original hipsters, I would say. So long before there were millennials, long before there were the bizarre coffee shops or grunge cafes in Seattle, there were the boomers, because they were the ones who actually started the conversation. And what's fascinating is when you put them side by side, they're not that much different, right? I know there are a lot of people who are like, oh, you know, young people, they don't understand. They sit there and they want to bash what's going on, but they don't really understand. Well, it's kind of interesting that when you put them side by side exactly like this, it's shockingly similar. And what's really, really cool, though, is as we have these conversations about boomers and millennials, what we're really realizing is that when you get these two generations together, and if they have a common vision and a common goal, it's going to get done. Why? Because boomers know how to get it done, right? They know the strategy. They know the ways. They've lived the experience. They say, hey, I have an idea. I can get it done. Millennials are kind of like these visionaries. People call them the visionary generation. They say, oh, I want to figure out a way to have cheaper flights. So we create Student Universe. Oh, I want to be able to get food delivered to me, but I don't want to use the direct delivery service. So we use Grubhub. Oh, I want to use taxi service, but I don't want to use a traditional one. So we have Uber. This is how these two generations come together. It's amazing because if you look at any successful tech company, it required a millennial to have a vision, and a lot of times it required a boomer to believe in that vision. So we now have a recipe for something that I think is pretty extraordinary, which is we have these two amazing cohorts. And by the way, if you are a Gen Xer, by the way, I don't want to leave you out. What's really interesting about Gen Xers is they tend to fall on the spectrum of being closer to millennials or closer to boomers. In reality, we're all the same. I mean, we like to say that we're all different, but the truth is we're all the same. We all want the similar things. But when you get these generations together in business especially, you're going to get an amazing product. And at the end of the day, what's really amazing is that the boomers are becoming more like the millennials than they thought they would. I can't even tell you how shocked I was when, and this was she has since passed away, but when my grandma went on Facebook and was posting on Facebook, I was like, oh my gosh, what is happening? What is going on? And now my mom is on Instagram. I'm like, I don't know. So the truth is that we're not that much different, right? We all like taking pictures. We all like taking a selfie, letting the world see how beautiful we are. So in reality, boomers, millennials, and the next generation coming up, which there's a lot of study on right now, but we're not that different, right? So here's the question that we need to ask ourselves today, and ultimately in your business, in your everyday life, this is something that we need to ask. Because I believe that any successful business, that this is what they're asking right now. How are social trends impacting these things? Technology, education, community, housing, your business. If you aren't strategizing, although we like to get into the weeds on things, oh, I need to get the listing in this way, I need to do this, the process of it. If you don't have a bigger, big picture thinking, and you're not really realizing, okay, so how do I market this property? How am I going to speak to an audience that perhaps I never thought of communicating with? How do I put something in there that's going to be an asset that I can leverage? So people want options. I think in today's society, especially with how technology is forming quickly, people want options, right? So all of you working with your clients, when you're working with a client, they want you to lay out right in front of them, okay, what do I have? What are my options? We've been recently communicating a lot with INHP here in Indianapolis, and one of the things they do is they actually are connected with mortgage partners from around central Indiana, around the state. And they say, ultimately, our goal is to give people options. They sit down and we say, okay, looking at your situation, you have this option, this option, this option, and this option. Right away, you're going to make somebody feel good. As a millennial, I am a millennial. I remember when I first started in the working world, I was always the token millennial in the room. And I'm sure that a lot of you have faced similar things. But I think one of the things that I said was, I want options. I want the ability to choose. I need you to give that to me. But what exactly are people looking for? So this is really important. And if you focus on anything today and in moving forward and in framing the way that you look at the presentations you see today, you need to ask yourself, What exactly are people looking for? Because if you know how people think, you know what they're going to want, and you know how to sell it to them. So in looking at place, people want their own place. They want their own space, even though a lot of millennials say, hey, I'm never going to buy a home. The other day I was actually talking about this. I said, you know, I really never thought of buying a home, but I'm now thinking about buying a home. If I get 1,000 emails after this. But I was like, I never thought about buying a home, but now I am. And I think that we are going to do exactly what the generations before us did. We're going to buy homes. But there are very specific things we're looking for. And these are the things that we're looking for. And this is according to the public policy or public sector consultants. And they're out of Michigan. And what they did was they looked at communities that were successful, bringing in investment and bringing in people. And ultimately that led to higher real estate transactions. What they found were 8 specific criteria of what makes a successful community. And I would argue this would also be good for a business model. What makes a successful business model? So walkability and physical design or aesthetics, for all intents and purposes, cultural and social opportunities, openness, safety, a welcoming culture, environmental sustainability, education, multimodal transportation options, entrepreneurship, or the presence of and success of small businesses, and messaging and technology. So walkability and physical design. This is the aesthetics. So when I started out in economic development, which is what I do here at MyBoard, when I started out in economic development works with all sectors. We work with education, we work with real estate. In fact, realtors are a huge part of what drives the economy because real estate is, it's a major driver. But one of the things they said was, Zach, if you ever want to sell something, you give people 2 things. You give them aesthetics and you give them experience. And so when we talk about walkability, and people, just on that video we watched before this, they said people are looking for walkability. This isn't necessarily new. For boomers, how did a lot of boomers get to school growing up? They walked. How did they go to grocery stores? Walked uphill both ways. And I bet those hills had sidewalks. How did they get to the grocery store a lot of times? They walked, or they were able to ride their bike or whatever, right? They were able to do it without a car. And so I think that we're kind of going back to that model. And so it's really fascinating when you study society that we had this blip where cars were just all the rage, right? We just had to have a car. And now looking at preferences, looking at demographic shifts, and especially if you're looking at a more global world and a global talent, you are looking at walkability as being a major component to a neighborhood. But it's about more than that. It's also the aesthetics. You can have sidewalks and walking paths and they look kind of like crap. That's not going to help. It's more about the community. It's about the way that we're designing our community. So here at MyBoard, we are being proactive in speaking with planners on how to plan neighborhoods. What is the housing product that people want? So that's just one component. Next is the cultural opportunities. Okay. So as I mentioned, people want aesthetics and experience. Do I have any people who like going to live theater, musicals, opera, anything like, or concerts, etc.? So let's say that I said, hey, I've got this amazing house in this community, but you're gonna have to drive, an hour to go to a movie theater. You're gonna have to drive a couple hours to go to a concert. You're gonna have to, for a lot of people, that's just not practical anymore because we want those experiences. And that's the way that we can tout a community. There's a reason that Carmel has been investing so much into the arts. There's a reason behind it. It's a strategy. And so that's something that you can sell. For me, in the future, I'll be honest, when I do buy a house, I don't necessarily know where it will be, but that will be something I will take into consideration wherever that is. I want to know, what can I do on a Friday night? What can I do over the weekend? Is there any way that I can go see an opera? I'm personally a lover of the opera, and if none of you have ever, people say they sound boring, but they're amazing. So if you ever go to Chicago, hit up the Lyric, that's all I'm saying. The next one is something that I just want to hit on, and I know that you know this, especially as realtors, but the openness, safety, and welcoming nature of a community is absolutely vital. So in the top 3 reasons why somebody chooses to live where they do, what are those 3 things? Schools, safety, right. Schools and safety are always in the top 2, always. They always are. People want to feel safe, and they also want those schools for their kids or for themselves. And so this is something that one of our colleagues, Dr. Catherine Laughlin, she's out of Raleigh, North Carolina. She is the place doctor. She basically teaches communities how to market themselves for people to come in. Because we know when you can draw on people, you can leverage that for investment, and we can get those home permits increased. A lot of people here in Central Indiana, a lot of realtors say the inventory is really low. It's low everywhere, but I'll tell you that there are homes being built a lot faster in other communities, and there's a reason behind it. So once we start understanding that, I think that we can understand that we can utilize these things as leverageable assets for investment. But openness and safety is something that's so vital. When you bring someone into a neighborhood, if right away they don't feel safe and they don't feel like it's open or welcoming, then they're probably reconsidering their options. So that's something that we as realtors, as community members, this is something that we need to start really thinking about. Now, this next one was actually a little bit, for me, I was kind of surprised. When I saw the public sector consultants report, I was kind of shocked to see environmental sustainability on their list. But we're finding now that if you can prove that a property or even a community is environmentally sustainable, that's an automatic premium. And I'm sure that a lot of you already know this. So Portland, Oregon is a community that has experienced extreme growth over the past few years. And that's something that they're using as an asset. And what we're finding even more of is that people are wanting to build homes that are more environmentally sustainable. There's actually a builder out of Oklahoma City that has a housing product that does not exist in our market, but it's really interesting because it's focused solely on efficiency of space, on connectivity within the neighborhood. That's the only place that they'll build, and also environmental sustainability. And if you have not researched housing products being built in other communities that are not being built in Indianapolis, I would definitely look into that, because that's a conversation we're having. How can we, if we're trying to draw in people from other parts of the country or the world, and we don't have the housing product that they want, are they going to live here? No, they're probably not. So this is something we need to start really thinking about, and I would ask you to keep your eyes and ears open in the coming years when you hear more about this, and if you want to learn more about this, this is definitely a marketable asset, especially to your clients. Education, as we mentioned, this is a no-brainer. Education is always important, but you have to also remember it's not just K-12. There are a lot of people that are my age that say, hey, you know, I'm not in grad school now, but I may consider grad school in the future. They want to know, what are their options? What options do they have? So if it was somebody moving to Central Indiana, you could tell them, hey, we've got a lot of institutions of higher education. And I'll tell you that when it comes to business attraction coming from economic development, that's one of the things that we tell people. We say we've got institutions of higher education here in Indiana that are, I mean, they're world class. So this is something that we need to talk about. When it comes to K through 12 education, one thing I would really encourage you to do, and also encourage your clients, is get involved with education. As a high school teacher, it was really interesting to me how many citizens would be really involved, and I would say, so do you have a student here? Does your child go here? And they're like, oh no, not at all, I don't even have kids. And I was like, why are you volunteering with like the PTA, or why are you helping out with this committee? And they would say, well, I understand that a really good school means that I have higher property values, that I can bring people here, and that ultimately it's going to make the community better. So that's something in moving forward, and with technology, how can we start thinking how technology can work with education? Here in Indy, there's a resource called Enroll Indy, and we have been a big supporter of that. If you're not familiar with it, I highly recommend that you look that up. Enroll Indy is an approach of the common application for IPS systems. So that's just a good example of how technology can impact education. This is one that is near and dear to my heart because I am somebody who loves to travel. I lived in Germany for 6 months, and while I was in Europe, I received a scholarship to be able to go to Italy and Poland and Austria and all these places. I was just in London about a month and a half ago. And this is something that for people who've traveled abroad, they come back to the US and they say, wow, we are just not up to par on our multimodal transportation options. And so I think that this is something that's becoming more important because people are traveling. My dad had never left the country and recently was in India, but also went to London. And when he came back, he said, you know, the first thing I noticed when I came back to the US is, wow, we have so much opportunity here. We have the opportunity to do what's going on in the rest of the world, but we could probably even do it better. We have that opportunity. How many of you are familiar with a little project called Amazon HQ2? All you guys better be raising your hand now. Probably the largest economic development project in modern history. It's huge. Have any of you read the RFP for that? If you didn't read the RFP, which I know that using that request for proposal and then coming from an economic development perspective, it's basically like if a client came to you and said, here, I need you to find me a house. I need all of these things. And if it doesn't have those things, I don't want the house. So what they did was they said, these are the kind of communities we want. And on the list was multimodal transportation networks. And they said, if you do not have multimodal transportation, we're not even going to consider you. So there were hundreds of communities that didn't have it, that weren't even considered because of that. And there are some that believe, hey, that's multimodal transportation, that's a way of the past. According to Amazon, it's not. So for businesses, this is absolutely important. This is the way people get to work. This is the way people are connected. We actually, when the vote here in Marion County went through for transit, we had young doctors moving in who were going to work for IU. And they said, we want to know where is the red line going to be? Or where's the transit line? And so they actually paid above asking price just because it was on a transit line. And so whether you're for or against it, I think that shows something. It shows that Amazon, if they are willing to invest billions of dollars into a market, but only if it has multimodal transportation, I think that says something. And I think for us, we need to start thinking about that. That is a marketable asset. If any of you have sold properties near the Monon Trail, can you sell that for a premium? Absolutely. Absolutely you can. So this is important in moving forward and thinking about, okay, so how does technology fit into that as well? Entrepreneurship, which is small business and innovation. This is something that I think we don't tout enough in Indiana, especially in central Indiana. Do I have anybody here from Boone County? All right. And it's happening everywhere, but I use Boone County as a specific example because we recently had them present on some of the small business programs they have. They are creating ways for entrepreneurs to go from an idea to a reality. And in a lot of communities, that's something that you can use as an asset. If somebody's moving from a coast and they're coming into Indianapolis, a lot of people say, we don't have mountains, we don't have oceans. Yes, we don't have mountains or oceans. But have any of you ever been to Paris, France? Really? It is ugly. I'm so sorry. People love Paris, but I was just there and I was like, there's nothing here. There's a river that runs through it, and yeah, you have old architecture, but there are no mountains. There's no ocean. It's in the middle of the country. People are kind of rude there, and it kind of smells. Like, let's be honest. In fact, I think Indianapolis has a little bit more going for it than Paris does. The only thing is they have about 1,000 years ahead of us, right? But they're also innovative, right? Fashion, art, ways of getting people from an idea to a reality. And so I think if there's something that we can do here in central Indiana, and you all as basically private or small business owners, you all understand this, how can we start helping entrepreneurs get from an idea to a reality? And then last thing I want to hit on is messaging and technology. So this is what I would argue to be something that a lot of people don't think about when it comes to real estate especially. But I have two friends. They're married. One, he was my fraternity brother in college. And he and his wife were moving from Bloomington. Actually, they weren't in Bloomington. They were outside of Bloomington, and they were moving here to Indy for a job, and they were buying a house. And for them, one of their top criteria was, how soon can an Uber get to me, and how much will it cost from our house to downtown or to Broadwell? When we use Grubhub, how many options are available? Now, I know that sounds a little wild, that people would utilize that in considering a home, but that's becoming the reality. That's becoming the new normal, I think. Education will always be important, and all the things that we list will always be important. But that's a way that a realtor could really market that property. I think their realtor was probably like, oh my gosh, I never even thought about that. And they were like, well, this is a great property because look at this, this, and this. Well, the next client that comes in, they can say, oh, and by the way, this, this, and this, right? And communities are trying to figure out how to do it well. they're trying to figure out how do we utilize technology and community development, bring them together and connect people to opportunity. And so that's why people are utilizing apps. Cities are actually creating apps to connect all the resources together. Paying your bills, doing this, taking care of your utilities, transit, things like that. You can do it all in one app. And so I think that's the way of the future. And so I'm going to hand it off to Angie, and she's going to talk about something which is down payment resource. And so for millennials, because we were talking about them, one of the biggest impediments for buying a house and for getting into the properties that we discussed, for being in that kind of a community, is the down payment, and that's difficult for them. But thankfully, my board, we were like, we need to be proactive on this. We've decided to give you guys a tool. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Angie. And thank you for your time, by the way, and for listening to my craziness.
Thank you, Zach.
So I love the perspective that Zach brings to the table, but I'm really, as a Gen Xer, kind of tired of the honorable mention thing. Any other Gen Xers in the room? Woo, okay. And I always say, as a Gen Xer, I'm the logistics and list checker. That's my role in society, is I'm the logistics person. We've got the visionary millennials, we've got the how to get stuff done and that work ethic of the boomers, and then I'm the logistics, okay, how do we connect the dots? So that's why I get to come up here and tell you how we connect the dots. You've got a few resources available through your MyBoard member services. One, I'll touch on this later too, but you've got a resource on your MyBoard dashboard called RE Technology. RE Technology is a content resource where basically I can say, here are the topics that are interesting to me. Send me information about that stuff. It's basically a newsletter subscription kind of on steroids. But this is an article that, as Zach and I were talking about this presentation, popped up in my inbox. Hallelujah. So I love it when it's timely like that. But this came up in my inbox that said, here's some information that you should know about this upcoming buyer generation. These are the consumers entering your marketplace right now. They are that millennial generation for the most part. 35% of buyers in the market right now are first-time home buyers. And 66% of those first-time home buyers are under the age of 37. Their median age is actually 32. Lots of them are married, lots of them aren't, some of them have kids, some of them don't. But that's the group of consumers that are entering your buyer space right now. So how do we serve them? What do they care about? What are they concerned about? Well, Zach told you some of the aesthetic pieces, some of the wish we have, this is where we'd like to live. But one of the things that we know about this upcoming buyer generation is they are very well educated, which comes with what? Very high student loans. Ouch, they hurt. So very high student loans also translate sometimes when they enter that buyer marketplace into, how am I going to be able to afford this? I would like to buy a home, but I've been really diligent about paying on my student loans, so where do I come up with down payment money? So what we've done as a MyBoard service is we've reached out to this provider called Down Payment Resource. On my screenshot it says DPR. I think since I took this screenshot we spelled it out just to make it a little more clear. But what Down Payment Resource, or DPR, does is it's a collection of all of the different down payment assistance programs that are offered in our marketplace in the state of Indiana, and it links that into your MyBoard services. So I'm going to kind of do these in reverse order. When you go into Matrix, into the BLC, and you run a search, you may have recently seen an additional button pop up on your search results screen. And you go, why'd they stick this extra button here? It's in my way, right? Is that what you said? What does this do? There's something weird here. I don't know if I should click on it or not. Everything might break. But it won't, okay? We don't let you break anything really important. So what's going to pop up is this little icon on these listings that indicate down payment resource. That tool that we've just recently integrated has determined, based on location and price point, that there may be a program eligible on this property. Because how many of you have ever worked with any of these down payment assistance programs in the state of Indiana? There are two sides to the eligibility for using those down payment programs on the purchase of a property. the property has to qualify, has to meet those eligibility requirements. The second side of the coin is the person. The borrower has to qualify, has to meet those eligibility requirements. So for you as realtors working in this space, looking up these properties within Matrix, we want to give you first look at this and say, of your search results, here's a bunch that could have programs that can benefit your buyer. Cool? Your response is cool. Okay. So those pop up as part of your search results. Do you guys see my top price range here? Do you see the top of my price range? Over about, it's like 400, okay? So over about the 420, 425 range is what I have seen in our system. You're not gonna find that these meet those eligibility requirements. Over about a 420-ish price point. But based on location and price, if it can identify some programs that could be useful on this program, on this property, then it's going to land that little icon on your results. If you click on that little icon, you, the agent within Matrix, this is some of the screens that you'll see. You'll see if there are programs that have been identified on that property. Here they are. Here they are listed out for you. No, no hiding it. Here are the programs that we've identified. If you click through one of these, it says next steps. And if you click on that next steps, it pulls up resources to give you more information about the program, what lenders may offer services for that program. There's a program flyer if you want to have it at an open house or stick it in a folder for your buyers that you're working with. And it links you as the agent to more resources, all right? On the client side, on the client portal, so when you have these searches set up and they're running automatically, or you find a listing and you send it as a one-time email out of Matrix to your clients, all of those land on the client portal, right? So on the client portal, you'll see when that property pops up, there's our little icon for down payment resource. Now, this is delivered to the consumer. The consumer's not a licensed agent, so their tool is going to look different than yours. Okay, so you get all of the good stuff. You get all the super secret agent stuff, is usually what I say in training classes. But your consumer is going to be taken, if they click on that little button, they're going to get taken to the eligibility page. And that's where that second side of the coin happens. Does the borrower qualify? Because these programs are income-based, so there's an income range, there's usually a cap. There are some other products that are available for, say, veterans, or specific vocations like teachers, doctors, nurses, firefighters, police officers. So there are some vocations that may qualify for some assistance programs that other, the rest of us don't. So it takes them to that eligibility page, narrows it down by what they put in, and then they can get more information. Also, when they submit this form, it's going to send it back to you as the agent that initiated that contact. Okay? See at the top, it all links back to the agent that initiated the contact. I'm going to go back a couple of screens because from that dashboard screen that I showed you at the very beginning, if you click on this little icon down here that says down payment resource, it's going to take you to this landing page where you can get a whole bunch more information. And do you see that top link in blue? Do you see what the end of it says? It says Angie Baker. That would be me. So that's a link that I can then put out there and start getting some lead generation on people that these programs may help. So I've got lots of resources here to be able to utilize these tools, connect better with my consumers, and provide information that could help them get into a home. Not just millennials, but again, that demographic has this barrier of entry to purchasing a home, where a lot of these really could be relevant programs that can help you get them into a transaction, get them into a house. All right. So we're sort of in the baby steps of getting this put together and out there. We officially launched, what was it, July 2nd? So what's today? Like the 18th? So it's only been out there for a couple of weeks. When you very first saw those little buttons pop up on your search results, that was like the day that we put it out. So we'll be offering more webinars, more trainings on what these buttons do, how you can use them, how to get some of these other tools in place. But on this page here, there's a click through for additional edging where you can watch some pre-recorded webinars, but you'll get some more communications out from from my board about these tools so that you can incorporate them into your business. Okay?